There's a real fear.
He's not hiding his identity because he's committed a crime or because he's worried about his safety.
I describe myself as a blend of conservative and libertarian.
He's an entrepreneur who's worked with several big names in tech, and he's conservative in Silicon Valley. It's enough to make him want to go incognito.
Saying that I want more border security, are people going to complain to HR? Am I going to get fired for saying that?
And he's not the only one in hiding. We spoke to several others who said the stakes were simply too high to share their identity. Here's another conservative from a major tech company. He spoke with us on the condition of anonymity. It was the only way he said he could share his perspective. If you were to give us your name, how would that impact you in your career in Silicon Valley?
I walked into work with Make America Great Again hat. There would be repercussions. People would take it as a personal affront. I would expect to be out of the company within weeks, if not a month.
These are the undercover conservatives of Silicon Valley.
There's such a lack of skilled workers, even in Silicon Valley, so you already are in a recruiting war. It's statistically more likely that you'll be going against other companies that are more liberal, so if you come out and say you're conservative, you may not be able to attract this top talent.
Reddit threads suggesting a secret handshake for conservatives. And offline, there's a social contract, a delicate coordination to keep their political ideology secret.
So you and I met at a conservative event. If we were at sort of a broader event and I wanted to introduce you to a liberal who I thought might be able to give you good career advice or something, we probably would lie about how we met.
Aaron Jin is one of the few who's more open about his politics. He's the co-founder of Lincoln Network. It's a community where he says conservatives and libertarians can feel safe sharing their beliefs. If I were to walk into a tech company and say, raise your hand if you voted for Trump, likely I wouldn't see any hands go up. Do you think that there are some hands that would go up, but people are just afraid to do it?
Oh, yeah. Like probably 10 to 25% actually did vote for Trump.
But much of Trump's rhetoric is counter to the ethos of Silicon Valley. And increasingly, tech CEOs are becoming more vocal.
Instead of building walls, we can help people build bridges.
We benefit from integration, we benefit from diversity, we benefit from including more people.
We believe the Dreamers are contributing to Microsoft. We have taken a pretty public stance that we will fight for their rights.
The CEO has a stated position on something where it comes to business. Generally, everyone falls in line. Whether or not you agree with it or not, you just do.
Now the tension is escalating as tech companies grow in power and influence.
It's a big deal as these tech companies get more and more control over the things we see. Easy content distribution coupled with fewer gatekeepers means people in these companies are going to have far more power, which is why I think it's a sad state where conservatives feel they might lose their jobs and can't speak out about some of the editorial decisions that could be made.
It's the perfect equation for a culture war, playing out in what has long been a mecca for liberal politics. But as these scrappy companies become giants with tremendous ability to shape a national dialogue, a new resistance is emerging.
Post-2016 election was just such I think a strong slap in the face to elite cities like San Francisco and to viewpoints out here that it is the idea of, well, we need to expel anything that's like close to it.
There was a breaking point.
A 10-page memo written by a software engineer at Google is causing all kinds of waves when it comes to diversity in the workplace. This yet-to-be-identified male employee claims women are less suited for tech jobs than men for biological and psychological reasons.
The fired Google engineer who caused such outrage after a memo that he wrote circulated, well, now he's speaking out, telling our own Lori Siegel why he wrote the memo.
This is James Damore.
There are many conservatives that are in the closet, quite literally, in Silicon Valley. And I mean, I'm a centrist, and I still can't express many of my views.
In that memo, Damore criticized Google's lack of ideological diversity. He said the company had left bias and called on Google to stop alienating conservatives. He also took issue with its diversity initiatives, and he said that the lack of women in tech was due to biological reasons. He said that women, on average, are more neurotic and have higher anxiety. I asked him about some of his more controversial viewpoints on gender. computer science, it hasn't always been dominated by men. It wasn't until 1984 that the number of women studying computer science started falling. So how does that fit into your argument as to why there aren't more women in tech?
It was simply different kinds of work. It was more like accounting rather than modern day computer programming.
You say those jobs are more like accounting. I mean, look at Grace Hopper, who pioneered computer programming, Margaret Hamilton, who created the first ever software, which was responsible for landing humans on the moon, Katherine Johnson, Mary Jackson, Dorothy Vaughan, they were responsible for John Glenn accurately making his trajectory. Those aren't accounting type jobs.
Yeah, so there were select positions that weren't, and women are definitely capable of being competent programmers.
Do you believe those women were outliers?
No, I'm just saying that there are competent women programmers. I'm saying that there were many positions that were listed as coding that are different than what coding currently is.
He was fired. Google CEO Sundar Pichai said his comments on women violated the company's code of conduct. But some believed he was fired for his ideological beliefs, and the backlash worsened.
The hysterical nature of the political climate is right now that it's turned into fear, where people are afraid of ideas that challenge their own, and they think that people that hold those ideas are not only wrong, but they're evil.
It brought to the surface touchy subjects: diversity, gender equality, political correctness in the Trump era.
It's no longer the fact of, well, we can just have different views. Now it's like, we're going to put you on stake and burn you alive, and like we're all going to celebrate at the scapegoat we just created. That's very different than it was, I'd say, last year. People want to like out these people who are center-right, or people want to label people.
You're labeled as.
And you're labeled as racist, you're labeled as, homophobic, Islamophobic. There are a lot of conservatives out here who didn't vote for Trump, right?
Yeah.
Who don't like him. But the fact that you have any sort of center-right view, you're automatically put in that camp now. There's alliances being created unnecessarily that actually do not fundamentally agree. Like the alt-right and like libertarians, which you both agree on free speech, do not agree nearly on anything on policy.
He says Damore's firing led to more undercover conservatives joining his organization. And he's not the only one getting calls.
There would be dozens or more over the last few days. And not just from Google people, but from other companies as well.
After his firing, Damore hired Harmeet Dhillon, a powerhouse for conservatives. She's the California representative for the Republican National Convention and a civil rights attorney.
Google managers have openly said that they blacklist people who step out of line, and that means out of line politically.
Where do they say this? I haven't heard this.
So inside the company, there are listservs where managers brag about blacklisting people. Conservatives at Google who are already on edge are terrified of being fired and being found out.
A Google spokesperson said the company doesn't condone blacklists. They're a violation of Google's policies, and they investigate and take action when necessary. I'm curious to know, for the folks that you guys are getting calls from, how does that discrimination play out?
Well, what it looks like is being disciplined for innocent remarks. It's being not considered for job opportunities and internal promotions. It's being denied promotion, and it's being abruptly terminated for manufactured reasons that are frankly not supported by the law or the facts.
It's so ironic because I feel like you could literally take that exact thing that you just said and apply that to some of the women's cases at these tech companies. Just like I'm sure you got a lot of calls from conservatives, I got a lot of calls from women in tech saying, I feel demeaned by a lot of this rhetoric.
You know, historically, I grew up in the Deep South. We had the Ku Klux Klan in my town when I was growing up in North Carolina. My father wears a turban, so I'm certainly familiar with discrimination. I've suffered sexual harassment as a woman as well. So the fact that that exists does not take away from the fact that political and viewpoint discrimination exists in Silicon Valley. Both can exist. Silicon Valley has a lot of issues. I'm just highlighting one of them in this case.
She says she's found a new underdog.
If you're a young man in your 20s, you're making a $250,000 or whatever with your salary and your bonus and your stock, do you want to be the martyr of conservative rights by standing up and saying, hey, I'm a conservative who's been discriminated against, and tank the next 20 or 30 years of your earning capacity?
The multimillionaire tech entrepreneur, an unlikely poster boy for discrimination.
Well, you know, I've always had a penchant for the underdog, and right now conservatives are the underdog in Silicon Valley. I got off the phone earlier today with a employee at a big tech company who tells me that some hiring managers will not consider you unless you are a woman or a minority or ideally both.
The divisions around the country, many would argue, are amplified on platforms built by the tech industry. The more time we spend online, the more divided we become.
There is some research to show that, you are, by participating in online social media, you're more likely to become tribal or view the other side as some very negative, like have a very negative emotion about them, which creates tribalism.
Is it ironic to you that here in Silicon Valley, the products created like Reddit and Twitter, it's created this sense of tribalism in many ways. It's divided us further, even though it's promised to bring us closer together.
And having built several recommendation algorithms, we built that to optimize for performance. So as in more people click on it, more people stay on the feed, more people are hanging around your site. In reality, you're just creating confirmation bias at the same time.
In other words, we have a tendency to interpret new information in a way that only confirms what we already believe. So while the powers that be in Silicon Valley may want to build bridges, increasingly they're facing a division of their own. What would have to change for you to be able to do this interview and share your identity?
Professional accomplishments that would be seen as cool enough to where people would still want to work for me regardless of that.
Give me the case for ideological diversity in Silicon Valley.
Half of the nation voted for the other side. If you want your products to be used by half of the nation, then have conservative libertarians at your company.